Thanks for joining us for another live webinar. Today's webinar is called First Contact, and we are going to specifically be looking at all of the CRM data that most of us will have inside our Salesforce systems and how we actually use that information. Now, address information and email information is always going to be critical to a high percentage of CRM users. At some point in your relationship with a customer, you are going to have to either send an email to contact them. You may have to send monthly billing reminders, invoices, advertising materials, and you really want to make sure that the contact information that you have for those different customers or accounts is up to date and can actually be trusted. Now, how can we do that in a very quick and short, simple way with the Informatica Cloud product? We have just recently launched a service that allows you to do this, and this is available to all standard edition customers from today onwards. By default, you will be able to cleanse 250 addresses, so you can have a bit of a play around with this, and we're going to see how we do that today. So to take part in today's exercise, you are going to require a Salesforce org. Okay, so that would either be used as a source for your addresses, or what you could do is you could actually have a flat file or a database where you want to pull data out and push it into Salesforce. You're also going to require the Informatica Cloud account, so you can either sign up at informaticacloud.com or you may have one already existing today. All right, so let's get started. Now, there's two very specific methods that we could go through for solving this type of problem. The first one is a case where we could say, well, I actually want to read data from one of the source systems within my business, maybe a flat file or a database or an application server of some type. You want to actually read that information out, you want to cleanse it, and then you want to push it into Salesforce.com. Now, that method is very efficient because you're literally just taking it straight from Salesforce, cleansing it, and ensuring that everything that ends up inside your Salesforce.com org is pretty good quality from day one. Now, you may not be in that situation. You may already have an existing Salesforce that already has all of this data inside it. You have all of your addresses, you have all of your emails, and you're looking for a quick fix to actually keep cleansing this data that may be coming from different partners, and you don't actually have control over the source systems. Now, if you're in that situation, you can still use the methods that we're going to go through today, where you would first read all of your address and email information from Salesforce. Okay, that would be your first step. And then your second step would be to update all of that address information back into Salesforce.com. All right, so two methods there. You could just say we're pulling straight from a source, straight into Salesforce, or you could actually be updating the already existing information held in Salesforce. Okay, so let's get started with method number one. All right, I'm going to show you how we build these different objects inside Informatica Cloud, and then we'll run through and have a look at the results that we get from this service. All right, so we are now inside our Informatica Cloud org, and as you can see, I have been running this task a few times to make it nice and smooth for us today. The first step that you'd have to do is decide, okay, where is my source data actually going to come from? All right, now for this first step, all you need to do is navigate to Data Services, go to Contact Validation, and from here, you can actually build a new task and then decide what your source is going to be. So this time around, we actually want a flat file to be our source connection. So I'm going to open my existing task. And the first step I need to do is say, all right, what type of operations do I want to do inside contact validation? All right, so I need to validate the postal addresses. I also want to add a geocode. So having a geocode, I may be able to add this to a mashup. If you're a company that's involved with logistics, those geocodes are very useful for your staff when actually trying to find a location or an address. And I'd also like to validate the email addresses that I have associated to this address. That's step one. Step number two, I'd like to decide, okay, where is my source information actually going to come from? So I could choose any number of sources that I already have existing inside Informatica Cloud. For this particular source, I am connecting to a flat file that's living on my local server. Okay, so we can have a look at that flat file. It is just a straight CSV, just with all of the different column names in the top row. And then below that, we have all of the different account information with all of the different addresses, and finally the emails. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I know what my source is. We get a short preview, and we know the file that we're using. Now, step number three, just like every other service in Informatica Cloud, you're able to define a filter. So you can have a lot of control over what information comes through. You may only want to bring through a small portion of the information. Maybe it's regional, maybe it's based on a certain criteria, such as the amount of employees. Really is up to you. All right, so data filters. Next step is the validation field. So this is something new that if you haven't used contact validation before, that you would have to become familiar with. Now, what we're doing here is we're actually choosing all the fields from our source system on the left-hand side, and we are specifically interested in all of the address fields, okay, and the email field. Now, what I've done here is, if you've used a data sync task, you'll recognize what's actually going on here straight away. And I'll actually just reset this. So I'll just clear all of these different fields. Okay, and we'll start from the beginning. So the first thing we need to do is we want our address line 1. So we just need to drag and drop address line 1. So address 1 is now mapped onto that postal address field. Now, I could have a separate line for address 2, but I'd actually like to merge those two. So I'm actually going to drop them both onto the single first line. I can continue. We can do billing city. We'll do country, postcode, state, and what else do we have here? No, we pretty much have everything that we want for these accounts. Now that's the postal address. Now what about the email address field? So again, we've just got to drag and drop that email, and we are pretty much ready to get going with this address validation. So we've got all of our different fields mapped. There are different formatting options that you could choose. Okay, so we could go for a discrete option where you have all the different fields lined out for you, so you can actually break them down. You can go for a hybrid where certain fields are actually all joined and mashed together, or you could go for unfielded where Informatica Cloud will actually discern all of those values for you. Okay, so it'll make an educated guess as to what that value could possibly be. So let's just quickly drag and drop all of those back onto there. Country, postcode, and state. Okay, and email address. All right, step number 5. Now, something that's a bit of a change for how we do our targets in contact validation is we're used to being able to choose any type of target, such as a database or Salesforce. Now, what we've decided to do for contact validation is we've actually limited the output just to flat files. Okay, and this is for a very good reason. What we're actually trying to do here is allow you to generate 2 separate files. So you could say, here's my cleansed address data, flat file CSV, and I'd like a secondary file. Okay, and that secondary file is going to contain all of the invalid or unverified addresses. So this just gives you a much more powerful way to separate things that are working versus things that are not working. For today, this is just based on flat files. This is not a problem for us, as you're going to see in the next few steps how we move that flat file data directly up into Salesforce. Now, we're not going to use a secondary file for today, so that's fine. But something that we do need that's very important is we need to have the account code field carried through after the address cleanse. So if I'm pushing through a load of account information up into Salesforce, eventually what I'm going to need is I'm going to need the account name. Okay, I'm going to need the account code, incredibly important because that's part of my external ID, and I could actually bring through all of the other fields if I wanted to. Alright, so since we're coming from a source where we're inserting or upserting this information into Salesforce, we're going to choose all of those fields. Alright, so our final option is we can actually schedule this. We're not going to do that for today, so we'll skip through that and let's just save that contact validation task. So we now have that address cleanse for flat files already. Okay, so we have that address cleanse task all completed and ready to go. Now, what it will end up doing is it will create a flat file for us with those cleansed addresses and a status on the email address. Now, the next step for us is to move that flat file up into salesforce.com. So let's go and build a data synchronization service. So we'll just log into data synchronization, and I'm going to use one of the existing tasks that I've created. And we'll just quickly fly through the 6 steps for the upload of the results. So we're doing an upsert of the information. We are actually choosing the cleansed address data flat file. So this is the file that we've done all the address cleansing with. Okay, and then we're actually going to target our Salesforce instance of an account. Okay, as you can see, we've already got some stuff in there. So instead of actually inserting duplicates, it will actually update the existing data. We don't want to filter anything. Field mappings work pretty much the same way. Now, I've done some interesting things here. I've actually chosen, well, I've created an address verified field inside my account object. Now what this allows me to do is I'm mapping a field called result percentage out, and this comes from the address validation service, which will give me a hard number. So based on an algorithm inside our technology, we will actually tell you how certain we are that this address is correct. So this is a very important number to keep track of. So you could say to yourself, well, if this number is ever below 60%, I'd actually like a person to be able to review this and ensure that it is correct. If it's above that, just forget about it, and it's more than likely right. Okay. Now there's some other interesting fields that I'm also making use of. The second one is billing country. Now something that the contact validation service will also do is it will standardize your country naming types. So if you have, for instance, USA, United States, America, it will actually standardize those for you using the address information that you've provided. So UK, United Kingdom, Great Britain, etc., so on and so forth. All right. Now, the other field that I'm also using is the email verified field. Okay, and this is quite valuable. So what we have done in the past, I think in our Express Yourself series, we were showing you how you could use regular expressions to work out if an email is syntactically valid. Okay, now what the contact validation service does is it goes one step beyond. It does that check for you, and in addition, it will check to see if the domain is valid, and it will also check to see if it's likely that that email will actually be accepted by that domain. So those are very, very important and very valuable. So rather than somebody just creating something that looks correct, this will actually tell you whether the domain is even valid and whether your email will actually be accepted at all. So that's very powerful to have that that verification status there. Nothing else. That's pretty much it for the data synchronization task. So let's jump out of there. Now, you'll notice as well that both of these tasks are separated. One of them is under contact validation, and the other is under data synchronization. So now we want to run these in a sequential format, and we always want to run them as a single unit of work. So to solve that problem, we're going to use a task flow. Now, that task flow will allow us to say, hey, okay, first I want to do the address cleanse of my flat file. So I've actually created a new task flow. It's called address cleanse into Salesforce. And I've added a task in here. So you would go add task. You would say, I'd like my contact validation task, and then you'd choose one of those tasks as your first step. So I have that as my first step, address cleanse my flat file data, That will in turn create a file with all the results. And then after that, I want to update all of the updated addresses and push them straight into salesforce.com. All right, so pretty straightforward, nice and easy. So we hit OK. Let's actually run that. And straight away, what starts to happen is you can see these steps in real time as they're actually being processed. So the first step is Informatica Cloud is reading that flat file with our address data inside it, and it's pushing each of those addresses through the contact validation service. As soon as it's completed with that, what will then happen is it will start to read those results and either update or insert new records into Salesforce. So it's completed those steps. There were 10 rows, and then finally it's now pushing those results up into salesforce.com. All right, that's been a success. Okay, so let's go into our salesforce.com org, and we will navigate to the accounts tab, and let's view all of our accounts that have come through. Okay, so cool. All those addresses and contacts and the account information has come through. We can see some of the emails that have been pushed through. Some of our billing city data has also come through. But let's dig into one of these addresses. Let's have a look at ChoicePoint. Okay, now the first thing you're going to notice in our account is I've got an address verified field. Okay, that address verified has come up as 100%, so that's pretty awesome. So we know that the address data that we have is 100% correct. We've then got the address information, okay, built into us for the billing address, and we've even had the country standardized. So United States is actually the standardized name, okay, that we've actually got. So if I jump out of that and I just have a look at the source data and I look at ChoicePoint, so we'll find ChoicePoint, that was number 9, and we look at the values that have actually come through. We were actually pushing through the value USA, and it's now actually standardized that for us as United States. Okay, now that's the first step on the address verification field. The second step is it's actually tried to validate the email address, choicepoint.com, and it's actually told us that email is not valid. Now, I wonder why. So, I mean, it looks pretty much correct. It could actually be the domain. So if we copy and paste that domain and we hit www.choicepoint.com, we actually see that there's a redirect on that, and it redirects you to LexisNexis. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. So it looks like maybe LexisNexis might have acquired that company, and that email domain is no longer valid. All right, so let's go back to all of our accounts, and we'll have a look at another one. Let's look at PayPal. All right, so PayPal has their address is 100% correct. The email is not valid. Okay, so I would have thought contact at paypal.com would have been correct. We can keep going through these things manually. Now, at this point, to speed up the process, you could use Salesforce views to actually filter down the information. So if we wanted to see only verified emails, we can say, all right, well, COVAD that's correct, the email is valid. MX will accept means that the actual domain is correct, but they aren't 100% sure on this actual email address. Okay, that account at honeywell.com. Support at informatica.com is valid, good to know. Otherwise, let's look at the unverified emails. So we can see straight away there may be something wrong with all of these email addresses, and we can look into a bit like contact, maybe contact us, it might be contact me. So we can dig in a bit more into that to work out what's actually incorrect. But regarding addresses, it looks like all of our addresses are 100% correct. So we know straight from the get-go that we're always going to be able to get in touch with our various accounts and contacts. Now, how would this work for the second method? Now, for the second method, what we do is, it's pretty straightforward actually. All the steps that we've done there you would do for using Salesforce as a source. Instead of actually going from a flat file or a database into Salesforce, if you were just cleansing addresses that already existed inside Salesforce, what you would do is go to your contact validation service And instead of actually reading from a flat file, you would actually just be reading straight from Salesforce.com. So I actually would just use the account as my source. All right. I would then use some data validation where I'm actually just taking all of those different fields and I'm just dragging and dropping them directly into my address cleansing operation. All right. I then create the output file just as I did before. Nothing different there. And then for the next step, to actually push everything up, in my data synchronization, I will just do an upload straight into Salesforce.com. So actually what I'm going to do here is instead of an upsert, I'm going to do an update. So I'm only updating existing information. I won't create any duplicates. And that source will be the cleansed address data from the service. Target will be Salesforce accounts. And then finally in my field mapping, I'll just map the various address fields directly into Salesforce.com. The only field that you need to ensure that you use here is your ID field. You need to carry that across from the contact validation service back into this synchronization. Otherwise, you won't be able to actually update your data. All right, guys. So that is it from me today. Um, I hope it has been useful to you. Thanks very much for participating. And if you have any questions, you can email me at the address on the screen, or you can go ahead and try out some of this stuff at informaticacloud.com.